Okay, so you want to own a water plant. Rows of gleaming stainless steel tanks, a bottling line running around the clock, pallets of crisp branded bottles shrink wrapped and stacked to the ceiling, trucks pulling out of the loading dock every hour on the hour. Water is free. It falls out of the sky, and you're going to sell it back to people for $2 a bottle. That's the plan in your head. And on paper, it looks like the closest thing to a money printing machine that a legal business can offer. Here's what the plan in your head leaves out. The water is free. Almost nothing else is. A modern bottling and treatment facility can burn through six figures in permitting costs before a single valve is installed, and some of the largest water bottlers in the world post profit margins in the low single digits despite selling one of the most heavily marked up products on a grocery shelf. Same commodity water, wildly different financial outcomes, depending on a set of decisions most new owners never see coming. Let's get into why. Before we go any further, you need to understand that water plant is not one business. It's several completely different businesses wearing the same pipes. There's the bottled water plant, which takes the source water, purifies it, and packages it for retail sale. There's the water treatment plant, which processes water for a municipal or industrial use and gets paid through contracts rather than retail sales. There's the water cooler and delivery business, the 5-gallon jugs that show up at offices, which is really a subscription and logistics operation more than a manufacturing one. And there's the private well and bottling operation built around a specific spring or aquifer, which sells not just water, but a story, a mineral profile, a source that people are willing to pay a premium for. Each of these is a fundamentally different bet on where the money actually comes from. Retail markup, government contract, recurring delivery fee, or brand premium. That distinction shapes everything else about the numbers, and this script is going to focus mainly on the retail bottled water plant, the version most people picture when they imagine owning one, while pointing out where the other models diverge. Let's start with what it costs just to get the doors open, because the sticker price on this business is a lot more complicated than buy some tanks and hook up a well. First, the source. You either drill your own well or lease access to an existing spring or municipal water connection. A commercial grade well capable of supplying a bottling operation costs anywhere from $30,000 to $150,000 to drill, test, and permit, depending on depth and geology. And that's before you know whether the water is even usable. You need a hydrogeological survey to confirm sustainable yield, meaning the aquifer can keep producing water at the rate you need without running dry in 5 years. And that survey alone can run $10,000 to $40,000. Then the water itself has to be tested and approved. Regulatory bodies require extensive water quality analysis covering everything from bacterial contamination to trace heavy metals to naturally occurring radionuclides, and that testing isn't a one-time event. It's ongoing, quarterly or monthly. Then comes the building itself. A bottling facility isn't a warehouse with some pipes running through it. It has to be built to food-grade manufacturing standards, which means sealed, washable flooring, and walls. Positive pressure air handling to keep contaminants out of the bottling room, and drainage systems that meet sanitation codes. Retrofitting an existing industrial building to those standards can run $50 to $150 per square foot, and a modest facility needs at least 10,000 to 20,000 square feet to house the treatment system, the bottling line, and warehouse space for finished product. That's a building cost alone of $500,000 to $2 million before any equipment goes in. And the equipment is its own mountain. A commercial bottling line, the machine that fills, caps, labels, and packages bottles at commercial speed, isn't something you buy off a shelf. A line capable of filling a few thousand bottles per hour starts around $300,000 for a modest setup and climbs past $2 million for a high-speed line capable of filling tens of thousands of bottles per hour. On top of the filler, you need the treatment train itself, sediment filtration, carbon filtration, reverse osmosis or ozonation depending on your process. and UV disinfection, which together can add another $100,000 to $500,000, depending on capacity and the level of purification your source water requires. Then you need bottle blow molding equipment if you're making your own bottles on site, rather than buying pre-formed ones, which is another $200,000 to $500,000, or you accept a higher per bottle cost buying preforms from an outside supplier. Add a labeler, a shrink wrap tunnel for pallet wrapping, an air compressor system, and a boiler for cleaning cycles. And the equipment bill for even a modest plant lands somewhere between $1.5 and $4 million. Stack the land or lease, the building, the well and water rights, the treatment system, and the bottling line together, and a genuinely functional small to mid-size water bottling plant requires somewhere between $3 and $8 million just to unlock the front door. Larger facilities built to supply regional or national retail chains push well past that. Now let's talk about what happens after you've spent all of that, because this is where the naive mental model really starts to fall apart. Permitting is the next trap, and people underestimate it badly. Unlike a gym or a restaurant, a water bottling plant sits at the intersection of food and beverage regulation, environmental regulation, and in most jurisdictions, a public resource. You need a food and beverage manufacturing license. You need environmental permits covering wastewater discharge, because a bottling plant generates rinse water and reject water from the purification process that has to go somewhere. You need a water withdrawal permit, which in many states requires proving your extraction won't harm neighboring wells or local ecosystems. And that process alone can take 12 to 18 months and involve public comment periods where neighbors and environmental groups can formally object. This is not a hypothetical risk. Multiple bottling operations across the country have had permits delayed or denied entirely after local communities raised concerns about aquifer depletion, and once a permit fight becomes public, it can drag on for years while your capital sits in a half-built facility earning nothing. Once you're actually operating, the recurring compliance cost never stops. Water quality testing, facility inspections, equipment calibration audits, and label compliance reviews. Because every claim you put on a bottle, spring water, purified water, mineral water, artesian water, has a specific legal definition, and misusing one of those terms can trigger regulatory action and forced relabeling of an entire production run. A mid-sized plant typically budgets $50,000 to $150,000 a year just for testing, compliance staff, and regulatory filings, a cost that exists whether or not you sell a single bottle that month. Now, the part of this business that actually explains everything else. Water is nearly free at the source. The entire cost structure of this business lives downstream of the source, in the packaging, the logistics, and the shelf. Here's the number that surprises almost everyone. The actual water inside a bottle typically accounts for less than 5% of the total cost to produce and deliver it. The bottle itself, the plastic, costs more than the water it holds. A single PET plastic bottle pre-form costs somewhere between 4 and 8 cents, depending on resin prices, which are tied to the price of oil and have been volatile for years. The cap costs another cent or two. The label costs 1 to 3 cents, depending on print quality. Add the box, the shrink wrap, and the pallet, and packaging alone can account for 30 to 40% of your total cost per unit, dramatically more than the water itself. This is the single most important idea in the entire bottled water business, and it's the same trap that catches ranchers and gym owners in different clothing. You are not really in the water business. You are in the plastics, logistics, and shelf space business, and water happens to be the thing that fills the container. Resin prices move with global oil markets, which means your single biggest input cost is tied to a commodity you have zero control over and very little ability to hedge unless you're buying at massive volume. When oil prices spike, your cost per bottle can jump 10 to 20% in a matter of weeks, and you cannot pass that cost on to retailers overnight, because retail water pricing is one of the most competitive, margin-thin categories on any grocery shelf. And that shelf is the second brutal reality of this business. Getting a new bottled water brand into a major retail chain isn't as simple as showing up with a good product. Retailers charge what the industry calls slotting fees, upfront payments, just to get your product placed on the shelf. And those fees can run anywhere from a few $1,000s per store for a regional chain to hundreds of thousands of dollars for national placement. And once you're on the shelf, you're not just competing against other small bottlers.